Good evening, Cape Conference family, and of course those that have been part of this journey with us each week as we interact with our that Bible study guide and the different authors that we're also having on the CC Me platform. And I'm not going to make you wait. I know you've been looking forward to this. With the introductory remarks have been said, and so allow me to usher in the one and only our guest for this evening, Elder Cliff Goldstein. And there he is. Elder Goldstein, welcome to CCME, the platform of the Cape Conference in South Africa. How are you doing?
Good. You're in Cape Town?
Cape Town is part of our jurisdiction as
Oh,
the
okay.
Cape Conference. But we've got our offices, one of our offices there, but I am in Gqeberha right now, where our head offices are. Is the
I
conference.
love
Yeah.
Cape Town. I'm actually going back to South Africa sometime this year. I don't know where or when, but I'll be down there.
Keep me
So
posted. Keep me posted. I'm looking forward to
okay,
that. And
okay,
look, before we even start, I would like to communicate my sincere gratefulness. I know how busy you are, and
sure.
but I was quite touched by your willingness, together you and your assistant, to help me in the request that I
Sure,
had. I just had a
sure.
sense, a posture of a willingness and excitement to serve the global church and in my interaction with you. And thank you for that. And thank you for even
Sure,
gracing this platform with your presence.
sure. Appreciate it. No problem.
Okay. And I mean, you are one of the people, as much as I think you are one of the most recognizable faces and in our global church. Yet there is an enigma around the person of Cliff Goldstein. I'm hoping that somehow today we are going to be able to, remove a bit of that with your assistance.
Well, we'll see, or I might make it worse. I might make it worse. Yeah.
Look, that is a possibility. But let's start here. Let's start here on my and I mean I love the poem "My Heart Leaps" by William Wordsworth, and then one of the lines there, he says, "The child is father to the man." And it's my belief that if you, I mean, one
Well,
of the truest um, access to who the person is also to look at where they come from
sure.
and who they
Oh, I
were.
see. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, who they
Of
were as a
course.
boy.
Yeah.
Of course, yes,
Sure.
not in a deterministic, way that who you were as a boy is going to determine who you
Sure.
are as an adult, but who
Sure.
you were as a boy gives us an index to, the person that we see today. So,
Yeah.
who's Cliff Goldstein? Talk to me about you as growing up, your home, and those
Yeah.
formative years.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a very secular Jewish home, and I my parents were not very religious at all, and they sent me to Hebrew school to get a bar mitzvah. We waited late, and we did it, and then I was in there 10 minutes, the class, and I asked to go to the bathroom, and I ran away from the school, and I went underneath a bridge and smoked a couple of cigarettes. And I was maybe 11, 12, and that was the beginning and end of my religious education.
Mhm.
I had nothing. My parents were, we would rarely talk about God in the house. And it
Mhm.
was always in the question, basically, did God exist? Okay,
Mhm.
that was as far as we went. And we came to the conclusion that he did. Okay. So it was never faith, religion. I mean, I was Jewish, but it wasn't a big part of, I didn't practice. I was very much aware I was Jewish, and I didn't really have any interest in religious things. I just thought
Sure.
it was all, and then again, it's kind of a long story, but I was always somewhat. I tell the story. I was actually in a pizza parlor in
I remember that
Florida.
session.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just hit me that, hey, there has to be absolute truth. I mean, there's a creation, there's the
Sure.
universe. Something had to create it. And whatever that was the truth. Okay. And it really hit me hard that there, because I grew up, oh, you have your truth and you have your truth, that kind of thing. And then to suddenly, there had to be the truth. I mean, that really just, it was an epiphany for me. And I tell the story,
Sure. Yeah.
that I was, after I walked out of the pizza parlor, realizing that truth had to exist. And this is the part that was very strange, because if you would have seen me, I was a writer. I was, there was nothing in me that you would see anybody religious or anything like that. I mean, it was just not there. But I remember thinking, once I realized that truth had to exist, I was walking down the street and I felt this, I felt like a pain in my chest. I felt it. I thought, wow, if it were humanly possible to know what this truth was, I didn't care what it was. It could have been atheist Marxism. We could have been all in the matrix. I didn't know. I certainly wasn't even thinking God or Jesus, but I thought, if I could know, because my realization that it had to exist. I mean, I can't be wrong. I can't be wrong on this. Something, we're here, something had to explain it. Okay. Now that's totally separate from whether I or anyone could know it. But I felt it so strongly. I was maybe 21. I can remember feeling this pain in my chest, thinking, oh, if I could know it, I wanted to know it. I didn't care where it led me, what it cost me, what I had to suffer, what I had to give up, if I could know it. And that, when I tell my story, that was really the only purely logical, rational, in a narrow sense of the words, steps in that led me ultimately to Christianity or to Jesus. In other words, everything else, it was like, I don't compare myself to the Apostle Paul in any way, shape, or form, but what did Paul's logic, reason, study get him to do? So it got him to kill Christians, okay, and persecute believers. And then boom, he's on the road to Damascus and has this very, I don't want to use the word irrational, I'll use the word transrational. He has this very trans-rational choice, and that converted him. Well, that's what happened to me. Okay, I had this very, if you've heard my story, I mean, I was sitting in a room working on a novel, and God came to me and told me, if you want me, burn the novel. Okay, I mean, people think it was hallucination, whatever. I know what happened, and that was 45 years ago, and here I still am.
Sorry for interjecting, because for me, that is quite, I mean, those two things, I don't know if you still remember the philosophy book you were reading in that pizza parlor.
I do. I have a copy of it on the shelf here. I went out and bought it just out of curiosity, just to read, because it was on the first page. The very first page, there was something there that clicked, that truth had to exist. Yeah. I got the book. I bought it a while back, just for the fun of it. Just for the fun of it.
Yeah, it's a big part. It's a big part of your story. But now, and then of course there is that sense and you hearing the voice that if we are going to make anything of this journey between me and you, Cliff, you've got to get rid of this book that you've been working on
Yeah.
for over 2 years, 2.5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. 2.5 years. Yeah.
That could
Yeah.
not have been an easy feat. How was that
Well,
decision made?
Well, at first, when the Lord came to me and told me that's what you got to do, I wasn't going to do it. It just wasn't possible. But then and again, this is 1979. It's a long time ago. But the thing that helps me is because I tell the story all the time. It keeps it in my memory. That's why I think the Lord in Deuteronomy told them, teach this to your children. By teaching it, you remember. But it was only, I had left my room. I was out walking the streets. And then I can't remember. I just remember at this one point, I said, okay, God, I want you. I want truth more than I want this book. But you're going to have to burn it for me. And it was at that, and again, don't ask me to explain, I don't know, it was when I made that choice, that surrender. Okay, but I was willing to give the book up, but you're going to have to burn it for me. I was willing. And again, I still don't know how I did that.
Sure.
I don't know how young I had poured, the book. But anyway, the bottom line, once I made that choice, everything lifted off me. Everything. And I went back to my room. And brother, when I burned that novel that night, I knew nothing of theology. The little bit I knew was wrong. Had you told me that night, just to give you an example, I was a sinner. What are you talking about? Yeah, a sinner. I'm not, it was a concept. And I bring that up only to emphasize how I knew nothing. Okay, I had read one or two dispensationalist eschatological books about Israel and the Middle East, none of which is our theology anyway, but they did make an impression on me, even and it's very interesting, and I would never, ever advocate using error, even if it would help somebody in the direction of truth. I would never advocate that. I never do it. But it's an experience that I've had where the Lord allowed me. He allowed me, or I'd say he used this error to get me to a point. And then, but anyway, that was, I don't know how. The book was my life, but here's when I tell my conversion story. I burned that novel. My life was writing that novel. I burned it. I realized I might not ever write again. I truly died to self. I surrendered. I gave. I could have slit my throat.
Sure.
That could have been more. And I died to it. And for about 2 years, I didn't do any writing. And then one day, because I didn't know what I was going to do, and then one day the door opened and I got to write in the church. And I've been writing for 42 years ever since. The Lord gave it back to me, So anyway, I had died to it. I didn't know what was going to happen. And here's the thing too, and that we can move on from this, from any particularly young person who might be listening. When I was in my early 20s writing that novel, I thought it was so important. There's such an important thing, and I had to write this. And now, 40 some years later, I walk into bookstores, popular, regular bookstores, and I see the novels on the shelves or even in the literature section. And I say to myself, even if I had been successful, Say, even, because I truly believed I was writing a good book, but you could you read the history of great writers, and a lot of them struggled their whole lives in poverty, whatever. But all that aside, supposing I did write great books, and supposing they were acknowledged, and they were in the bookstore, on the shelves, there, it's like looking at it now, 40 some years later, I think of the word Solomon in vanity, all is vanity. The Hebrew word hevel, it means vapor, breath. I mean, the bottom line is I walk in and I see these books on the shelf, and I could have sold my soul. I could have launched my soul to maybe have had a few of my books on the shelf. And it's like, wow, thank you, Lord. Thank you for not letting me lose my soul over what in the end could ultimately have been so meaningless. And that's just something to think about.
Sure, definitely.
For whatever it's worth. Yeah.
One of the things I love about your story, and of course, I do want you to reflect on this, and then also I do want you to talk about. I don't know how right I am, but you joined the Adventist church in 1980, and so I do want you, to share how did that come about? How did you find the Adventist message?
Okay.
But one of the things I love about your story, number one, is how God is never threatened by our yesterday and our past, and that when we come to Him, not all that we did is lost or is wasted or was even, and how He chose what you were working on. And I mean, now we can say, and we see in your life and your ministry, that indeed the pen can be mightier than the sword. And funny enough, God has used that skill, that passion, that interest. Your ministry for over 40 years.
Yeah, well, let me go back first, and then we can get into that last part. What happened was, and this is fascinating too, right before that encounter, I had been drifting into the occult, and I was having these supernatural occult experiences, and I finally decided to read about it. And on my way over to the library, I need a job, and I stop at a health food store to ask for a job. Well, they didn't have a job, but I told the guy I was into this occult stuff, and he starts warning me about the devil. Well, telling me about the devil. He telling me about Santa Claus. But he says, here, read this book, and he hands me a book. And so I take the book, I never see it before, and I'm looking at it, and I'm walking through the library, and I get a book on the occult in the library. And so here's the point. I'm walking through the library. For the first time in my life, I have a book on the occult. First time, and I'm going to read it. First time in my life, I have the book the guy handed me in the health food store. Cult book in one hand, The Great Controversy in the other. Okay, and I was clueless. Well, anyway, so these were Adventists. Anyway, 2 nights later, I burn my novel, I'm Born Again, and I meet these Adventists in a health food store, and then we just start studying. Okay, we study, and it's a number of months, and then I left, and I met some other Adventists, and it took me about 8 months from the night I was born again and went to the Adventists the next day. It took me about 8 months till I finally joined the church. Okay. See, I was actually even fellowshipping right about the time I met them. I had met these charismatics. And there was this charismatic fellowship at the University of Florida where I was. And it was vibrant worship, the drums, and all the music, and a lot of young people and young girls, meanwhile in the Adventists, it was this health food store. There were 2 or 3 of these weirdo vegetarians, because I used to hate vegetarians. Now I am one, but and so I fellowshiped with, and the Lord used them. The charismatics, they gave me some fellowship they gave me some things because it just took me. I mean, the Adventists were very nice to me, and I was getting fascinating teachings, but they just struck me as weird. Okay, I just was very, But anyway, yeah. But anyway, after a while, I joined. Well, anyway, what happened was the Charismatics kicked me out. They threw me out after about. I joke. I was in Christianity 1 month. And I already got kicked out of my first church, okay? And it was like, they even had me speaking in, quote, tongues. And then finally, the Adventists gave me a book to read, and it brought up a lot of very good questions. And when I went back to ask about the questions, they just kicked me out. And then it took me, anyway, I become an Adventist. And then I was in an Adventist self-supporting institution training there, and it just turned out that that at that time a guy at the GC, Charles Bradford, who had been he had been the North American Division president, and they had a publication that they had to reach the Jews, okay, and the editor retired. And somebody told Bradford about me, okay? And Bradford expressed an interest. And so the bottom line, I was an Adventist 4 years, okay? I went one semester at one of our schools, just one semester. So outside of that, I didn't go to the schools. I didn't go to the seminary. I never pastored a church. I skirted the system entirely, and I was 4 years in the church, and I went to the GC, and I've been there ever since. So it was, and they were very suspicious of me. Everybody was always very nice to me, but I remember I was there about 6 weeks. This is Tacoma Park. This is when the GC's still in Tacoma Park. That's how far back. And I'm there 6 weeks, and they want me to give a morning worship, okay? Well, ministerial department was in charge of the worship, okay? Well, somebody from the ministerial department comes to my office, talks to me. What are you going to talk about? Whatever, okay. An hour later, somebody else comes from ministerial, and I get the same spiel, we don't do this. And then later, somebody even calls me from ministerial, and then I found out. And then I went and gave worship, and it was fine. I didn't preach the church's Babylon, or I didn't preach heresy from the Talmud, or whatever. And my boss said they were nervous about me because, look, I was only 28 years old, and back then at the GC, that was young. For what I did, now we got a lot of young people, but this was in the 80s. It was old men. It was a bunch of old men mostly. So I'm young. I've been in the church only 4 years, okay? Hadn't gone to their schools, okay? And Jewish on top of it, just not what they were used to, So they were, but over time, and now, 40 years, I'm just, I'm just sort of part of the place for whatever. But anyway, that was ultimately, and then I started out doing the Jewish work, this magazine for the Jews. And then, are you guys familiar in Africa with Liberty Magazine?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know how much. Yeah. I became editor of Liberty. And that's actually a funny story too, because before they even knew me, I had written an article or two for Liberty, and they were accepted. So that gave me a link, and that helped. He helped me get the job, the editor. Sure. He spoke high, helped me. And I edited Liberty. And then after a while, I got bored, and it was about 25 years ago when I had heard that they needed an editor for the adult Bible study guide. Well, sure. I was really just bored at what I was doing, and I threw my name in, not really thinking they would take me seriously. Okay. I really didn't think, because, I don't have a doctorate degree. I don't have any formal theology training. And it's kind of a long story here. I think I got the job because the first 3-4 people they asked turned it down. And there were some pressing issues coming to the general conference right about that time. And they wanted to get this out of the way.
Sure.
And so the bottom line, they asked me, I accepted, and 25 years later, here I am. And that's why we're
around
talking.
1999.
Yeah, 1999. Yeah. And I will be July 1st of this year. I'll be 40 years at the GC. July 1st, I'll be 40 years. So how much longer? Next year's GC session and annual council, I don't know what they're going to do. They could throw me out, but I hope not, but it could happen. But it's a privilege. I take it. I say, and then we can move on. I'll say 2 things very quickly about that are for whatever it's worth. I would only been in the church 4 years, and I go to the GC, and it's like, wow, I'm at the GC, wow. I had that sense, and I had the sense of privilege. It's a privilege to be here that I really don't deserve, okay? Well, I can honestly say the sense of, wow, I'm at the GC, wow. Well, I lost that 35 years ago, 35, but the sense of privilege has never left me. It's a privilege. I don't deserve it. And then, the time comes, you move on. I've been here long enough. I've seen them come and go. None of us are indispensable. If time should last, whenever I retire, they'll put a new name on the door, and then boom. How many? Do you remember the names of previous Sabbath School quarterly editors? Of course.
Well, it could have been in 1998, 97. No.
Yeah. There was, and then there were. So anyway. So that's basically, I came into the church and wound up at the GC. I say it was a God thing for me to have gotten there that way, and through the grace of God, things have worked out so far fairly well. I take nothing for granted, but, and I think there were people too in the beginning who really wondered, how is this kid, this guy gonna survive here? And yet it was, I didn't go there thinking I'm going to change I was still a new convert, and you tend to think you know it all and you're holier than thou. And so anyway, the Lord was good to me. So
now, I'm sure you know this classical African proverb, it takes the village to raise a child.
Sure.
Now, when you look back, I'm always very skeptical of people that claim to be self-made. As an African and as a Christian, I think that does not exist. And it takes the village to raise a child. When you reflect on your life of contribution in your ministry, who are some of those villagers that have made those contributions? And I want to
so many. In fact, I wrote I even wrote something up, and I plan to one day, after I retire, I've had a column in the Review for a long time, and I wrote an article years ago thanking the Adventist people, because who else? I could learn the gospel, but I can't learn it in the context of the sanctuary, which really gives you the hope for the judgment. The gospel, the state of the dead, that is one of the most beautiful, powerful things. Then the truth about the Sabbath, and who else kept Ellen White's ministry. I am so infinitely grateful to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because who else? Nobody else is teaching this stuff. Nobody's even, they don't even got the blasted Sabbath right. You know what they don't even get, and 99% of them think the dead go off to hell, heaven, and I can't be part of that. So anyway, so there are many, and I thought too, I'd like to write an article about all the people who have helped. Oh, there's so many, but I could. Well, there were those in the health food store in the very beginning who studied with me. Now, one of them died. One of them went wacko. One of them went. But there's one, actually, I was on the phone with him the other day, and we stayed friends, and they dealt with me brilliantly. I look back, you guys, they dealt with me brilliantly. And then there were, when I got to the GC, there was the editor of Liberty Magazine, Roland Hegstead. He had been editor for 34 years. He had a big influence on me. There was, in many ways, at the building itself, the one who probably had the biggest influence on me, and he's retired now, was Dr. Angel Rodriguez. If that name means, Angel was like, my nickname for him was. What's that?
Was he at the Biblical Institute?
Yeah, BRI. Yeah. He was like, had a very big influence on me. My nickname for him was the Archangel Rodrigo. And just had a very big, and there have been many, many people. Let me tell you a super quick story, just about
go ahead.
This. When I was offered the Sabbath School Quarterly, they offered it me on Friday. They wanted to know on Monday, and I accepted. And I'm walking to the VP's office Monday morning, and I have no peace. I feel like I'm walking through a swamp in rollerblades. I'm feeling crushed. And I thought, this can't be right. And I just happened to walk by the office of Jim Kress. Jim Kress then was the head of GC Ministerial. Okay. Now, Jim and I knew each other. We were not really close friends. I mean, we saw each other. We did, but whatever. And I said, Jim, can I talk to you? And he says yes, and he closes the door, sit down. And I say, Jim, I just accepted the Bible study guide, but I have no peace. I don't understand. I feel like I'm being crushed. And even to this day, when I tell the story, I get goosebumps. Yeah. This guy looks at me. As I said, he hardly knows me at all. He looks at me and he says, oh, Cliff, that's easy. You haven't let go of liberty. And the moment he says that, it's like, ding, 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 ding. You're right. Everything lifted off of me. We prayed and I bowed. And I thought it was, what a gift this guy has. It's amazing. But then I said to myself, look, they didn't make him head of the World Church's ministerial department because he didn't have any gifts, So anyway, I mean, that's not exactly what you were saying, but I think that's an indicative story. And no, I have been the vast majority of the people whom I have interacted with in the Adventist Church it's been very positive for me, and so anyway.
Well, thank you. I mean, I did tell you that the first part of this conversation will be that I want to give us a reflective conversation on your life and how I find you here today. And today I find you as director, as editor of the Adult Bible Study Guide of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that's what we are morphing into right now. And one of our identities is that we've always been known as the people of the book. And I think there are few things that have contributed to that image than the centrality of the adult Bible study guide in our church.
Wow.
Number one.
Wow.
Number two, of course, we are a global organization, but the beautiful. I mean, I've been to a couple of countries, and then I would go to our church. The music may be different, the dress may be different,
Wow.
but you've got this guide that just
Yeah.
connects you as a
It's
family
amazing. Yeah.
with people globally. That's amazing. How
Yeah.
integral, what is the mission of the ABSG, and how integral is it to who we are as
Yeah.
Seventh-day Adventists?
Yeah, well, that's very heavy too, and it hits me. I remember, the way the scheduling works. I got the job, but it was still going to be 2 years before my first Sabbath school that I edited even came out. And I can remember I was in, it was Serbia. I was in Serbia with a guy, and I walk into a church that I'm going to speak at. And it's during Sabbath school. And it's a big church, and all these people are there in there with their Bible study guys, the Bible study guides, and they were looking at it and marking it. And it really, like, whoa, it just sort of hit me. And I remember I said to my friend, I got to go on a walk, because it was, Sabbath school was still going on. I didn't have to preach for a while, but it is very humbling to me. I can go to a church in South Africa, which I've done, and they're studying. I've been in an apartment in Tokyo, and they're studying the Bible study guide. I've been in Iceland, and they're studying it. Well, I'll give you a couple of. I remember Jan Paulson had just become GC president at about the time I just became Sabbath School quarterly editor. We kind of inherited each other, and I remember he called our staff into his office not long, just to talk to us, just get to know us. He was there. He had been a VP. But now he was in a new role. And I remember he asked me, so Cliff, what is your vision for the Bible study guide? And I didn't really so much think I had one. The thing's been around since like 1860. Okay. And I come in 130 years later. I wasn't told to revamp it, regenerate it, revise it. It was edited. Okay. But anyway, I wasn't sure. And then I remember saying, I want to give our people the gospel in the context of present truth. And he smiled. He didn't talk a lot. They don't talk, but he gave me a little smile, and that was it. Scandinavians, you got to put about 4 beers in them to get him to loosen up. And so that he wasn't going to happen with Paulson. But anyway, all that, I guess I shouldn't even say that. That's
such a warm person. Such a warm person.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. But for me, what I think when I look at the Adventist church, look, what tribe are your family from?
Xhosa. Same as Mandela.
Okay. So here you are. You're somebody from the Xhosa tribe in South Africa. I am a Jew who grew up in Miami Beach. And here we are. Okay, here we are together. And see the diversity of and really, when you're at the GC, you can really get a view of just the worldwide, the diverse. It's astonishing. I don't know if there's anything in the world quite like it. It's particularly that that hasn't been around that long. I mean, the Catholics have been around 1,500 years or whatever. But what draws us? What makes us Adventists? I can think of only one thing: our beliefs our distinctive beliefs as they center around Jesus. Okay, that's it. That's, trust me, as good as the Adventist Church has been to me, and whew, they have been very good to me, better to me than I deserve. As good as the church has been to me, I'm here only because of the teachings. I'm here because of that's the only. I mean, the church is nice. It's a nice organization, and they've been good to me, and that's all fine. But I couldn't. And again, it just comes back. Here's a thought too. I'm studying with these Adventists, and I come in and I'm accepting it. And then I said to a friend of mine one day, these are the people that first led me in, but how do we know this is the truth? How do we know there are others who claim it? And my friend said something to me that stays with me to this day. He says, well, if you believe there's a God, it's not unreasonable to think that somewhere out there he's got some body of people who know what the truth is. You see what I'm saying? And when he said that, I thought, wow. I mean, it doesn't prove that we have it, but suddenly it made, and again, I can't talk for anyone else. I just remember that desire for me to have truth no matter the cost. And then and what it cost me the night I burned my book. And then we led right to Adventists. But all that aside, once you accept the existence of God, to me is the most obvious truth there is. I can read you the ludicrous, illogical arguments that some atheists try to bring up to explain. Then you got something like Daniel, so God exists. Well, what about the Bible? Well, Daniel 2. I'm sorry, Daniel 2. I don't know how Daniel 2 could have been written if there was not a God who knew the future and predicted the future. That brings you to the Bible. The resurrection of Jesus, that my latest book, Risen, Finding Hope in the Empty Tomb. I believed in the resurrection, but I just explored it. And I said to my wife, I've written 26 books. I don't think there's been a book that has had a more powerful impact on my faith than Risen. Okay, I came away, and so the evidence for the rest, so that brings you to Christianity. And then if you're not going to give up the Sabbath, you've wiped out 99% of your options. Okay, if you're not going to give up the state of the dead, you've wiped out 99% of the 1% of left. You see what I'm saying? So for me to be it's like I tell the Adventists, you're stuck with me. Okay. From the experiences I've had and the things I believe, I have to be here. I have to be here. No, that's me. And I know there are a lot of Adventists that struggle. But anyway, all that aside, so in many ways, the Bible Study Guide was a perfect venue for me because I believe the doctrines. This is what makes us who we are. And to have the one Bible, it's a heavy responsibility. We in the office, there are 3 ladies and me in the office. And every night we go out to eat once in a while as a group. And because we're working, we don't talk. And we think about it. And we just we think, well, you believe this is the remnant church. And this is the church that's got the message for the world. And we 4 have probably working on the one thing that has more influence around the world. You kind of look at each other and we tremble a little and say, they better pray, and so on. But we do, I guess what we're saying is we take it seriously. We take our responsibility seriously. But really, in the end, I think there's the genius of the Bible Study Guide is also the big problem with it. The genius is is that you've got one Bible study guide for the world church. I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a publication like this. This goes all over the world in like 128 languages, and then yet at the same time, how do you communicate? How do what we say, how does it talk to you and your people and those in Latin America? Those in the Hawaiian Islands, those who are in Vietnam. But how I answer it for myself is, and when the Bible study guide is not the Bible, obviously it is, but God had one Bible for the whole world, so he could have, why not one Bible study guide for the whole world? You see, in principle, but there are aspects in there that we do tick people off at times. We do tick them off, and I catch the brunt of it. But we do, when I have people complain, unless they're nasty, I do what I can to listen. And I said, let me think about it. Thank you for your concern. Pray for, and I don't say it condescendingly. We have reading committee. We have translators that read over, but things do slip through, and it's not easy to be culturally sensitive. To all the different groups out there, and we have to passionately avoid politics. In fact, I remember even a number of years ago, we had something, and the author had put in something about Nelson Mandela in there. And it was and I was still relatively new in the job then. And but the people on the committee, like, well, Cliff, you need to be careful with this. We need, even somebody like Mandela, but I took it out. I do go out of my way, because look, we've got Adventists in every country on political, if they weren't Adventists, they'd maybe be killing each other. They might end up doing it anyway, as we've already seen, unfortunately. So we do go. And what I do is sometimes I tell the staff, whenever I get in trouble, whenever there's like editing, I just get them in the Word. Just go to the Word and get them in the Word of God and keep that front and center. So I do have to, as I'm editing, people bring up good stories, interesting stories, but I have to ask myself, will this cause more trouble? Will this offend people more? And it's just not the purpose of the Bible study guide. It's not a place for controversial topics. So if it's, sometimes it might seem a little benign or whatever, there are other venues where you could do that. But the Bible study guide, we want to cast as wide of the net as we can and encourage as many of our church members as we can on what we believe are the crucial issues, and not get caught on peripheral stuff. So, but anyway, that's sort of.
Now, one of the things that we spoke about earlier, not in this conversation, but I'll make sure that I remember it, because I think it's very important that we touch it here. But now, just talk me through like an overall helicopter picture of the process.
Okay, sure.
Is involved in
it's amazing.
Quarterly from the idea. Do you decide and say, this is what we want to talk about? Or from the reading, you see, that is interesting. We think the church needs to be studying this. Talk to me about the process that ultimately lends to a quarterly for that quarter.
Yeah. Well, it's a process that I had inherited, as things been around. And I imagine it morphed over the decades too, as the church has grown. But what happens is, after each general conference session, where they vote in the new officers are keeping the oath for all the world at the GC, the world divisions. Then they have maybe, the GC sessions in the summer. About 6 months later, they have what they call are the departmental advisories.
Sure.
And there might be new people who've been voted in, and they come to the GC, all of them together to meet with the and anyway, they do that for publishing, whatever. So we do it Sabbath, all the different ones. So they have these few days of meetings, and part of that meeting we have with the Sabbath school people, and they call it, the scope and sequence. Sure. We plan for 5 years what's going to come. Okay. Wow. Now, please understand, though, because we work when the GC, with the next advisory, which will probably be in, Lord willing, early 2026. Okay. They will not start picking topics. The first topics that advisory is going to pick is going to start about 2030 or 2031. Okay. And then, so we're going to be, by the time that advisory is done, heaven forbid the thought of us being here, but we'll be up to 3035. Okay. Because from the time I make an assignment till the time the ABSG hits the pews, 5 years. It's 5 years. It's a cumbersome process. And when I first got in, I thought, oh, come on. We've got to be able to do better than this. But see, the issue is, it's ultimately all the world divisions who are ultimately responsible for the translation, the printing, the distribution, and so on. So we have to give all of them whatever they need, the time they need to do it. And then we give the authors 2 years to write it, okay? And trust me, we had one guy, and people do me in. We had one guy, gave him the assignment. We saw him a couple weeks ago, and he goes, when's my quarterly due? We said last week. So we just cut him loose. We're not going to work with them. We're going to do so. But if you give them more than 2 years, they can easily put it off, okay, and not do it. And then they wait till the last minute. But anyway, that's a separate issue. So we have the scope and sequence, and we get together and we pick, they generally want 2 books of the Bible, 2 topics per year. Okay. And then so we vote on a thing, whatever. And then it's not a governing committee. Sure. It's recommendatory. So then we take it to AdCom, and AdCom approves it. So we have the scope and sequence. And then it's my job then to try to look for authors who, you want a New Testament guy for a New Testament book. We've got one coming up on stewardship, a stewardship guy. And then it's my job then to look for the authors, and we give the authors 2 years. Sure. And then ideally they send it in, and then we format it. Then we send it out to a world reading committee. Unfortunately, most don't answer, but it's policy. We have to do it. And then we have local people, and we give them about 6 weeks. And then we get together, we look it over. That committee votes to accept or reject it. Okay. And then when it votes to accept it, then I've given about 3 months and I edit it. I have about 3 months to edit it, which is plenty of time. It depends on the quality of it. I mean, put it this way, as an editor, any good editor, you're the editor, you're not the writer. You want to leave in as much of the author as I can. And I really do, even at times when I think, I know I could rewrite that better, but I thought, no, leave it. Sure. It's theologically sound, it flows, it works. So believe me, I'd like to leave as much of the author in as I need to, but if I need to, I will rewrite every word. Okay. And I've done it. Not lately. I've done it. And then here's the irony is too, when I do a heavy edit like that, I'll give it back to the author. Say, look, I'm sorry. I don't care. I'm going to do what I believe I need to do. I've got authors angry at me, and all whatever. I'll deal with it. And I say, if you want your name off it, you can have your name off it. In every case except one, they wanted their names on it anyway. So whatever. Anyway, but I will do it, even though I don't want to. For better or for worse, my name is on the masthead. I'm the editor. The buck stops with me. I need to be responsible. I need to answer for it. And if I messed up, I've said before in the past, if any author ever really complained and went to leadership, and leadership looked at it and agreed that I ruined it or whatever, then I would resign. I would need to resign. Okay. But so anyway, we do that. And in most cases, they're all right. Even if you'll notice, and this was something that I inherited, they're not called the author. They're called principal contributors. Yeah. And that was something that I inherited. I want to be careful. There were some issues before. So the bottom line is I wasn't the only editor who had to deal with irate authors. And so they changed that even before, and I'm glad they did. So that way now it gives the author a little distance for his name on something that he or she really didn't write. But anyway, so we do that, and then I edit it, and then it goes to a smaller committee who basically look over my editing. Okay. And that's the committee that's really the most important to me. And that's the one that I want. We work, in fact, on this morning here, I've been working on, this is a Sabbath School Quarterly with the comments, and a lot of the comments, this is a second edit, and a lot of the comments are from somebody from BRI. So I always edit the thing on the assumption that somebody from the Biblical Research Institute will read it over. And every now, I've been 25 years. At times, I've had to go down there and complain. Look, I'm counting on you guys. This is part of your job description. So, but for 99% of the time, they've done it and they've been helpful. So then, anyway, they look it over. I look at the marks that they make in here. And I have to use as editor, I don't have to do anything the committee says. I won't take the job. One of the first questions I ask, I want the committee, and I look at what they say. And some of these things this morning that I've been working through, I was very thankful for. Very thankful, because I want the help. But anyway, and then at that point, I do the second edit. We format it, and then pretty much at a certain stage, our responsibility at the general conference ends with it. Okay. Now, what happens is every now and then we've got some I can't imagine what these men would be like being married to, but some translators that will, and yet we're thankful, even though some of the stuff is a bit nitpicky, some of it's language. They'll find some things that have slipped through, and we will do what we can to correct them if we have the time. But at that point, my responsibility, my office's, the general conference's responsibility, however, it pretty much ends. And then it's all the divisions and the unions, and it's their responsibility then to get it translated, to print it and distribute it and promote whatever. And somehow, amazingly enough, through COVID, through
Mm.
everything we get through the grace of God. I don't think there's been a Sabbath School Quarterly since they started. Again, we looked funny. I was in the office the other day talking with one of the ladies, and somebody was doing something a little differently with the quarterly. And I said, well, just because they've been doing this since the 1860s, it doesn't mean we have to keep doing it. I was only teasing because it's changed quite a bit since, when you look at the early ones, when you look at the very early ones, and it's changed. And then we have the question too of how much Ellen White do we put in the Bible study?
Sure.
That's always been a challenge, and I pretty much tell the authors it's a Bible study guide.
Sure.
You keep them in the Bible all week. Make the position from the Bible. Now, if you come across somewhere a great Ellen White quote that'll fit or something, use it, but keep that. And then usually on Friday, after we've made our position with the scripture, then we could use Ellen White to buttress it. Now, I don't know the divine ratio. I've been attacked because there's too much of her in the quarterly. I've been attacked because there's not enough of her in the Sabbath School. I don't have the divine number. I was brought there to use my judgment. I've been, for better or for worse, I've been using my judgment. Some have more. This next one on the Great Controversy, the book, I looked it over after we got it because I hadn't seen it in a while. Sure. And I will say that there's a little bit more Ellen White in there during the week than I personally am comfortable with. Okay. Sure. But I thought, all right, whatever. I don't want to.
I was going to ask, I'm sorry for interjecting. I was going to ask you about that. As you've aptly said, this is adult Bible study guide. And I was just wondering how much of that with the new lesson that we are starting now, the Great Controversy, is consistent with that. The easy assumption is that even the title is based on the book by Ellen White, and that it looks like it's the study of the book with biblical support as opposed to how it has always been a study of the Bible with Ellen White support.
Yeah, well, and really, basically, the first one is what it is, okay? That's what I was told they wanted, okay? That's what and in principle, it's fine. It's fine, as long as we keep it in, it was, but we needed to make it Bible-based, okay? As she did with Great Controversy. She was Bible all the way through there. So, you could argue it's a study of the Great Controversy theme, the biblical Great Controversy theme, structured around Ellen G. White's book, The Great Controversy, structured using that basic structure. Is it something that I myself would have recommended? Maybe not, but this is what they wanted. So, as I joke with people, I just work here, I just work here, and they wanted it. And I see them because, it's in unison with them sending the book Great Controversy out and so on. So even with that doesn't really, as I look through it, again, I don't have the divine ratio. I know that what I've been doing for a long time, generally, there hasn't been as much spirit of prophecy in it as there's going to be in this one. Now, whether that's wrong or whether that's even better, that's the way it should be. I use my judgment on it, and that's what I've been doing. A new editor could come in whenever I do go and have a whole new approach, and could be better, I hope somebody can make it better. So anyway.
Look, I mean, it is a beautifully structured lesson, and two questions now in this segment of our conversation. Number one is we spoke about this off camera. How do you as the department guard against over representation of a certain segment of the global church? And
well,
and I mean, you and I, we've spoken about that, and I'm quite, and I feel strongly about this because I think one of the purpose of this platform is Sesame is to amplify the African voice and African stories, African perspective.
Sure. You're a big part of the Adventist Church. You're Africa.
Precisely. But sadly, there has not been much contribution, and let's just limit it to this project, the Adult Bible Study Guide. We are at best great consumers and readers, but there's not much representation as far as contribution is concerned. Now, like I said to you, when we were talking privately, for me, I can't squarely place the blame on the side of the church, the General Conference. I'm sure we also have some ownership to take, but the question is then, how can we meet halfway? Is this a disturbance, for your department, for GC, that hey, we don't have as much contribution that coming from that?
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's certainly nothing intentional, and we have had. In fact, we do have one coming up. I talked to him last week, a Ghanan, Daniel Bediako, and I actually even called him the other day. He was in Ghana, just saying, "Hey, we're counting on this Bible study guide. We need this." And then Kwabena Doncourt, I think also was a Ghanan. He did one for us. And well, let me just say this. It's certainly nothing intentional. Okay. It's certainly nothing on my part where we want to. All I want are the best authors and theologians I could get, because it sure makes my life a lot easier. I have moments, and I talk about this, sometimes I'll have a week, and it doesn't happen that often, but I'll have a Sabbath school quarterly, and I have a week in front of me, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to edit it, and I can feel myself. I literally, this happens every time, because I feel the weight of the world church, because I have to fix it. I can't, we're just going to skip this week. I can't. Something's got to. And I could feel the sweat and the stress. And I remember even going down to one of my best friends in the building one day, Gary Krause. And I go to Gary and I say, man, my job could be so stressful at times. And then what happens every time I just put it away for a day or two. Then I think about it. Then I come back, and through the grace of God, we work through it. Now, my whole point with that story is I don't like that. I want good Sabbath school quarterlies, okay? And so I don't care. Now, I think the main reason is probably proximity. Okay, I'm there in the building. We got a lot of theologians in the building. There are people in North America. I mean, I just know these people. I read their books. They're known. So I naturally draw. And I don't usually have a ton of time either to find an author. Sometimes that's the hard thing. So there is and it is wrong in a sense, there is a tendency for me to draw from what I know. And so on. But I know that we certainly, I would love to have more representation. I'm surprised I haven't gotten chewed out since there's not as many females writing in there as I had. I thought, oh, no, you can bring that up. It's not intentional on my part. And I actually, there was a very well-known female New Testament scholar, and I've tried 3 times to get her, and she just said she couldn't do it. So be assured, there's, for whatever it's worth, I know in this day and age there's so much suspicion, but it's nothing intentional on our part. And if I knew more of who was in Africa, and in fact, I don't even know Latin America represents a lot of the church. Now, what happens is the head of BRI right now is a Latin American. He's Elias de Souza. He's a Brazilian. And I go to him. He has been excellent. I say, Elias, I need an author on this is our topic. Can you recommend someone? And well, he's a Latin American, so he knows a lot of Latin Americans. And everyone that he's ever recommended to me has been excellent. So well, you know what I might do? Even after when Daniel gets done, I could even talk to him about, because they need to know English. I mean, I get non-English.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't care how good their English is. I've got some of them that have been in the States for 30 years. They got their doctorates from Andrews. I don't care how good their English is. I could still always pick up things that, which is not a big deal if they're English good. There's only one guy named Gerhard Vondel. Vondel is an Austrian. I would never know. His grammar is better than mine. It's one of these Austrian, these Germans, detail guys. But I do want, the number one, they got to be straight theologically. Okay. Sure. I don't have time to deal with that. I've had them, people try to push their agendas on us, even though, and it angers me because they know that's not what it's for. And every now and then, some of them slip it past me. And only after it's out that I have someone, and I didn't see it. Well, my only consolation is, well, if I didn't see it, chances are most of the church members are going to see it. Because the Bible study guide has to be solid, conservative, but balanced conservative Adventism. And the day it ever goes anything from that, it'll destroy it, because people won't use it. People won't use it. They'll go to other sources, and the church will get fragmented. Okay, I mean, there's always voices screaming, but the liberal agenda, the higher critical agenda, that never goes in. I mean, I don't touch that stuff. Whatever valid questions some of them might bring up. I remember there was a text critical question in the book of Daniel. It said, when it says knowledge shall increase. Now, do you know Hebrew at all? Are you familiar with Hebrew?
Yes, I am. I studied it from my theology degree.
Well, it's interesting because the Hebrew word for knowledge, da'at, is very similar to the Hebrew word for English, ra'at. And it's just a daleth and a resh. And they are often mistaken. Many times when the scribes would copy, they would sometimes, it was easy to mistake them. And I think the Septuagint translates it as evil will increase instead of knowledge. Now, that was an interesting point.
That's interesting.
And it was something to look at, but I thought about it and I said, nah, this is not something that belongs in the adult Bible study guide. And so we didn't put it in. We didn't put it in. I think it was a valid point and it was something to look at, but I just didn't believe the adult Bible study guide was the place to look at it like that. In fact, when I was interviewed for the job, the first thing the VP said to me was, the Bible study guide is not a place for controversial issues. And that has stayed with me. And it shouldn't be that. It's there to feed our members, to feed them, to help ground them in I'd say the gospel in the context of present truth. Why are we Seventh-day Adventists? And anyway, that's
last
yeah.
I know, and you mentioned this, I know that you wake up at 4 each morning. How does an average day of the editor of the Adult Bible Study Guide look like?
Well, here's the thing, Well, I do a lot of freelance writing and editing. I do that, and I get up and, I don't live at the GC now. I mean, I don't live in Silver Spring. I telecommute from Tennessee. So during COVID, I had some family issues. But I get up, and generally just this morning, I was working on the ABSG, but a lot of times before work time, I don't. When I was in the building, I would get up, do my own personal stuff, then go to work. But when I was at the building I get there and I just get to the office and I just sit there and work. And then I get up and take a break. I've been in the building. I've been there for so long. I got friends all over the place. I was known for kind of traipsing around the building, visiting my friends. But, it's an office job. I sit in an office and work. And then, there are a lot of committees at the GC, and I'm terrible because I don't go to half the committees I'm supposed to. But the ones that I have to, like we have the reading committee for the Adult Bible Study Guide. And there's nothing really particularly exciting. I sit there in front of a computer, and there was a while, it was so funny. I had a Sabbath school, this was 15 years ago, that just drove me to drink. And I used to pick up my garbage can and I'd throw it into the credenza, and the ladies outside, they knew, Cliff still, they'd hear the bang, and I was so frustrated. And so, it was, it is, I love my job, but it can be, when I'm editing a Sabbath School Quarterly that I'm just having problems with, it's very stressful for me. It really is, because I feel like I have to fix this. I have to try to fix it. And sometimes when you're not working with something that's even fixable, it's now, for the most part, now I haven't had to rewrite a Sabbath School Quarterly in quite a while. But if I have to, I'll do it. Though I'm getting kind of old for that. It's like I have 3 months to do what we give them 2 years to do. Do it in 3, but I'll do it. In fact, there was many years ago, we had 1 year where all 4 authors didn't come through. Okay. And we had to, and it's funny, one of the ladies in my staff said, that's the only time I'd ever seen you get sick, was during that time, because the stress, I got sick, and I generally don't get sick. I mean, I'm older now, things are a little harder, but back then it was the stress. So that, because you feel the pressure, you feel it on there, and you feel, I feel it, I say the ultimate obligation. My ultimate obligation is not to AdCom. Okay. It's not to the people I work for. I feel like in the sense that hired me, my ultimate obligation are to the people in the pews. Okay. Now, I have yet to see a conflict. You know what I'm saying? I would be in a very difficult position if I suddenly thought, well, they're asking me to do something and I really think this is wrong. I would probably have to quit, or something, because I feel an intense loyalty to the General Conference. I really do. I don't want to, my ultimate loyalty is to God, obviously, and so on. But I have great respect for the leadership, and I trust them. I don't always agree with everything. I don't always agree, but as I said, I just work here, and so on. So, but anyway, that's pretty much my day.
Well, let's now we are morphing and transitioning into this particular quarter that we are introducing now, the great controversy. Just a few remarks, and I appreciate how generous you've been with your responses, and I really appreciate that, Elder Cliff, and I want to put you on the spot before it's March now, before June. I know how busy you are. I want to invite you. I want to, and thank you for being generous enough to send me, the book earlier this week. And I'm going to have to invite you after I've read it, and then so that we have a conversation about it. Reason, finding hope in the MD2.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah. Sure. I'd be glad, because I love that. As I said, I never questioned the resurrection of Jesus. Sure. But when I got done writing that book, it was like, wow, I found the evidence so compelling. As I said, nothing I have written has impacted my Christian faith more than that book that I wrote. Just seeing and it wasn't, I didn't write it for that. I didn't write it, well, you need to strengthen. I just wrote it because I thought, hey, something to write on. Maybe I could find another angle or something. And pretty much and what I did too, because I wrote it for non-Adventists. I don't quote Ellen White. There's nothing Adventist in there. I wrote that for any serious seeker who maybe is being drawn to Christianity, but this resurrection of the Jesus, I try to show, hey, it's not that outrageous as you can. But one of the things I did do is I followed Ellen White's chronology in Desire of Ages, and because they could be a little confusing. The gospel narratives, if you don't, and she just put it together so seamlessly, and so I followed that. And the key thing, and I actually found another scholar who said this too. When it says like they went to the tomb, the ladies went to the tomb, she said they didn't. That doesn't mean they all went together at the same time from the same direction. And once you understand that, and I found another scholar who said that, it's like, let's say, how do you pronounce your name? Sivu?
Sivu, yeah.
It's a Cliff and Sivu went to Burger King. Okay? Now, this could mean that Cliff and Sivu got in Cliff's car, and Cliff and Sivu met and ate at Burger King. Or it could mean Sivu went to Burger King, was there for 30 minutes. Cliff came in his car from his house, and they met and ate. Once you see that, 90% of the things resolve. But anyway, I'd be glad to talk about it. It truly encouraged my faith writing that book. So
sure, I can understand. I mean, it's such a critical and reaching topic.
It's Christianity. It's Christianity. If you destroy that, it's like it rests or falls on that. If he was resurrected from the dead, the Bible's true, Christianity. If he wasn't, it's all a lie. And the evidence for it, I was blown away. I was blown away by it. So anyway.
I'm looking forward to finishing it. And like I said, I'm definitely going to be inviting you on the
platform. Sure.
The great controversy. Why do you think it was important, that it is important for the church to be studying this topic right now, second quarter 2024?
Yeah. Well, specifically second quarter 2024 is, I think what it is that we have the Great Controversy Project, where we're distributing great controversies, and leadership thought, why not have a Sabbath School quarterly on the Great Controversy? Not specifically the book, though. Again, maybe some thought that. But look, it's not the book that matters. It's the biblical theme. And, I remember probably close to 38 years ago, a local leader in the church who was pretty liberal. He was a pretty liberal person, okay? He gave a talk. And interestingly enough, he gave a talk about last day events, which, the liberals don't usually pay much attention to that. But he said something that I'll never forget.
Sure.
He said, whenever you're looking at last day events, there's two things you need to remember. Number one, there's a great controversy. And number two, the dead sleep. The dead. And I just thought, wow, the dead. And there is a great. So, to me, the great controversy.
Wow.
First of all, it's all through the Bible. It's all through Scripture. It's there. And they're even now, I've got a book on my shelf here, an evangelical called God at War. There are more and more evangelical Christians picking up what they call the cosmic warfare motif. They're just coming to the great controversy. They're all, they're now seeing what Adventists have been preaching on for. You can't fully, none of this really makes sense. The cross, why Jesus would have to die, why we're still here, even the, Christ's minute, it all deals with how God is dealing with the great controversy, how he's answering Satan's charges in a way that will ensure evil never rises up again. It's a theodicy, if you know that term. It's a theodicy. Yeah. You can explain that maybe later to people. It explains so much.
Yeah. Now, thank you so much, my friend. And as somebody who has, of course, you were very clear to mention that the primary contributor, but you've edited it. What if at the end of the quarter, at the end of the next 3 months, what do you hope people do not miss? What do you hope people would have found? What do you hope would have been resurrected?
I just hope. Well, I do think it's probably amazing to me how many Seventh-day Adventists probably have not read the book, The Great Controversy. And I just find it extraordinary that somebody could be a Seventh-day Adventist and not have read that book. Okay. It's just so much of who we are, our history, and so forth, and the principles that are in there. But again, more than the book, it's the gospel that's revealed in the book. It's the Jesus who, rather than deny even angels free will, gave them free will, knowing they would rebel, knowing we would rebel, knowing it would lead him to the cross. And yet he did it anyway out of his love, wanting beings to love him. In the end, ultimately, it all comes down to just surrendering to God in light of the cross, in light of what, when you believe that the God who created the universe, John says anything that was not made, anything that was made by Jesus. So the entire cosmos, which they now believe was what we believe was created, that was created by the same person who was born an infant in Bethlehem. Okay. That was the same one who died on the cross. In light of that, it's like, wow, what else matters? And when you submit and you surrender to that God, to him, for he's done that, that's got to be the bottom line of everything. And so I hope somehow through it all, they get a clear view of God's love as revealed through Jesus.
Elder Cliff Goldstein, let me hit the closing remarks, and then after this, I'm going to ask you to pray for us. Let me, number one, thank you for taking the time.
And glad to do it.
Your time and your answers. But more than that, I'm so glad you followed that discomfort in that pizza parlor. Your life has been a blessing, not just in North America. Your life has been a blessing, and its impact has reached us, even me here. I thank God for your life. I really thank God for your life. And
it's kind of heavy, man. It's kind of heavy. That makes me a little. Well, praise the Lord. Thank God for his goodness. Yeah, it's. Well, I think of what God spared me from. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, man.
Okay.
If you could please, there are people watching, and if you could please pray for our viewers, our members, our friends that are with us in this conversation.
Okay, great. Father, I do thank you for having led me to not just to Jesus, but to Jesus as you have revealed him to the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yes, sir.
And even though it's all there in the Word, tradition has covered so many obvious truths. And I'm just grateful for the Seventh-day Adventist Church and for you having raised it up and having brought me to Seventh-day Adventists and brought me to this truth as it is in Jesus. And Lord, it's wonderful to know the truth, but this in and of itself, it doesn't save you. There'll be many people who will know more than enough and be lost. And we don't want to be that way. So we just claim the righteousness of Jesus. We thank you for what he's done. And we claim his perfection in place of our own faults. And we want to seek to be faithful to you and faithful to the commission that you've given us and to share with others these truths that we love so much.
Yes,
we thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.